So the announcement was made over the tannoy that the plane was going to make a crash landing into the sea. I froze in my current seated position, noise and chaos all around me. I just sat there in silence, pinned to my seat. I even yawned. What sounded like an explosion startled me out of my trance. This was followed by water rushing up from the front of the plane. Loud, white, broken water, and then silence and transparent blue. People were swimming out through an exit, and I knew I had to do the same. My seatbelt released me, and I made it out of the plane and into the black open ocean and to the surface to gasp for air. Once my lungs had recovered, I looked around. I hadn't noticed how rough the sea was until then. I suddenly felt fear. The sea was black and massive and moving. Huge swells appearing all around me. The sky was dark blue and full of stars. It was early morning, so at least the sun was on its way. The plane was way behind me now, mostly submerged. I could still see which way its nose was pointing, so I turned and swam in that direction. It was a frantic attempt at survival, and I knew that I wasn't going to last long. Surprisingly though, I felt full of energy and stamina. This increased when I saw a glimpse of what looked like land ahead. I kicked until my legs were banging against rough rocks. My hands clawed at the sand, and I was then crawling to dry land. I lay there on the dry sand for what felt like forever. Eventually my thoughts turned to thanks and total amazement that I had made it to this point. I stood up. It was much lighter now. The stars had gone. There were people everywhere. On the beach, sprawled out, some walking around, some just stood. Loads of human dots still in the sea. The plane was almost beached but still moving around. The sea was calmer and blue. Silence. I couldn't hear. I tried rubbing my ears, assuming I must have water in them, and the noise came back in full clout. Screaming, crying, splashing and shouting filled my silent space. I turned to my left, and stood just behind me was a man who was watching the chaos. He was black and bold, and his face was strangely calm, like he had just been placed there to observe. "We should go help people," I said. "Yes, okay," he replied. We both walked back into the water and started helping people out onto the beach. I hugged those who were crying, ripped clothing to bandage wounds. I just kept going until everybody was out of the water, dead or alive. I tried to resuscitate a couple of people, but without success. I started CPR on a child, and after the first rescue breath, he started coughing and spluttering back to life. That felt wonderful after the 2 previous attempts that had left me feeling full of doom. I hugged the boy and patted his back to help get all the water out. I looked up to see where the man was from earlier. He was only a few meters away doing similar, patting someone on the back who had just come out of the sea. They were on all fours, trying to catch their breath. He turned back and looked at me, and we both smiled. I picked up the boy, who had now stopped coughing, and placed him on my hip. He put his arms around my neck and started to sob. He can't have been older than 5 years old, skinny, tanned, and light as a feather. I walked up the beach to the foot of a large rock. It was shady, and I sat with the boy to rest. The man suddenly stood before us, holding out half an empty bottle of water. "I found it," he said. "It tastes okay." I took the uncapped bottle from him and took a sip. I didn't realise how dry my throat was until it was doused with water. There wasn't much left, so I offered it to the boy, who took a gulp, and then handed the dribble in the bottle back to the man. "My name is Jacob. and you can keep the bottle, he said. I'm going to go and look for a water source in a bit. You might need the bottle later. Thank you, I replied. My voice was rough and my throat sore. I turned to the boy. He was still clinging to me. So what's your name, little one? I cannot remember, the boy said and started to sob again. Well, I'm Abby, and don't worry, you'll remember your name soon. Jacob and I will look after you. Everything is going to be all right, you'll see. After a short rest, the three of us took a walk. The island wasn't big and could be walked around in an hour or so. The sand was orange rather than the normal yellow sandy colour. In the centre of the island was a huge rock, I'm guessing 50 feet tall. Parts of it were green on top. It looked like grass. Jacob said that he planned to try and climb it later and see if there was any life up there. Maybe see if he could make a signal fire. Everyone else on the beach was still subdued and probably still in shock. No one had tried to be the leader yet, or tried to organise everyone like you see happen on films about this type of disaster situation. I suggested to Jacob that we gather everyone together and list names and maybe skill sets, like if they're a doctor or if they can help with heavy work, etc. I also suggested that we move the dead to a separate part of the island. Jacob agreed that this was a good plan. Everyone was gathered, names were recorded, skills were identified, and supplies stockpiled. Baggage had been rescued from the sea, where it had started to wash up. The plane now beached a little way out. A team of men got together and planned to swim out to the plane to gather more supplies. Another team of men moved the dead. The wounded were gathered together and tended to by 3 doctors that had been identified. Everyone was still a bit dazed, but they appeared to positively respond to us taking control and getting things organised. There had been no arguments or conflict. People simply just obeyed. I was shocked and in disbelief about how easy everything was. We had enough food and water to last everyone another 2 days or so. A piece of debris from the plane had been pulled onto the beach and someone had made a huge fire inside of it. There were trees on the other side of the island, but not many. The fire was mainly fed by baggage and what looked like seats from the plane. I had no idea how they'd got there. The smoke was thick and black. There was no breeze, so the smoke was going straight up. Most people sat around the rock in the shade. This was the west of the island and the sun was still rising in the east, so the rock was creating some shade. This would go as the sun rose in the sky and would move around the island as the sun set. I wondered how our first night on the island would go, whether the fire would still be burning. The shade was already starting to shrink. I guessed it must be around 9:30 or 10 a.m. We must have crashed at like 4 a.m. when the sky was dark when the sky was dark blue rather than black. A lot had been achieved in the last 5 or 6 hours. It felt like it had been a lot longer. I walked towards a man who was gathering bits and pieces from the sand. I had no idea what he was planning to do with them. "What are you doing?" I asked. The man looked at me a bit shocked. His blue eyes were unusually wide open. "To be honest with you, I don't know," he said. "I think I'm still in shock or something. I can't sit still, so I'm just doing something, I don't know." His speech was starting to quicken. I put my hand on his shoulder and gently got him to calm and take a deep breath. "Don't worry," I said. "Everyone is a bit shocked. We'll probably be like this for days. Take it easy on yourself. One step at a time. Now, I have a plan and wonder if you could help. The shade is disappearing from over there and it's going to get really hot soon, I reckon. If you can find something that can be used to make some shade for people to hide under, also find someone to help you build it." "Yes, okay. I will definitely try. Thank you." He then scuttled off up the beach. I wasn't sure why he had thanked me when I had just given him a kind of order, but I assumed that he appreciated having an actual task to focus on, or that I'd helped to calm him down. I continued to stand in my spot on the edge of the beach and look around at all that was going on. Jacob and the boy had gone off somewhere together, and I couldn't see them. My mind drifted back to thinking about myself. I had my pink trainers still on my feet. Trainer socks that when I wiggled my toes, I could tell were still a bit wet. Black cropped leggings with no rips in that I could see. A loose purple top, now dry and no rips in it. Underwear felt a bit damp though. I was quite impressed about being in such a good state of repair. This was the first time I'd really checked myself over. I had been dazed or something up until now. Adrenaline had kept me focused on all the things I had done, and now it was time to stop. My legs suddenly became weak. I slumped to the ground and just sat there. I needed to pee, so I went where I was sat. I had no injuries that I could tell. I looked up at the sky, and in my head I thanked God that I was alive. I then saw Jacob and the boy walking towards me from across the top of the beach. A wave of water washed underneath me from the sea, washing away what I had just done. Again, I said thanks in my head to whoever was looking after me. Why was everything falling into place so easily? Why was I alive and here? Back on the plane, I had been on my way to Mexico for a holiday alone. I remembered being on the plane, kind of looking forward to my holiday plans and kind of not. I was going back to a place I'd been to before. The first time, I had loved the quaint little hotel, but I had lots of negative experiences during my trip, so I was going back to try and erase the bad memories of the beautiful place and face a few fears that had been created there. I had been feeling excited about going somewhere familiar, as the familiarity made me feel safer than I had felt the first time round. However, I did feel a bit sad about being alone. It had been at this second that the announcement of the crash landing had been announced. Jacob and the boy were near now. The boy started running towards me, so I picked myself up off the sand, happy to see them. The boy leaped into my arms, and it felt quite nice. I remember my name, he excitedly shouted over and over. That's amazing, I exclaimed, excited to find out what it was. Jacob had reached my side and had a huge beaming smile on his face. So, are you going to tell me what your name is, or are you going to leave me in suspense? I asked. The boy started running about, laughing. I started laughing too, and I asked Jacob what the name was. Jacob said that he didn't know, that the boy had suddenly remembered whilst they were unpicking a net they had found up the beach. The boy hadn't wanted to tell us until we were back together. Well, come on then, I shouted to the boy. Tell us. I can't keep calling you boy forever. My name is Saul, the boy shouted. Wow, what a cool name, Jacob and I both said at the same time. How is it spelt? S-E-O-U-L, he spelt out. Cool, a bit like the word soul, but cooler, I said. Yes, my parents always told me that I was a lucky soul. The boy went on to tell Jacob and I about his parents, his home, childhood, and life as we walked back up to the beach towards the shade. He became tearful thinking and talking about his parents because they were on the plane with him and he didn't see them again after he swam out into the ocean after the crash. He had assumed that they hadn't escaped, as he had taken a look round at where the dead had been placed earlier on and had not found them. Jacob said that a team of men who had swam out to the plane to get supplies had said that bodies remained inside. Nothing had been done about getting them out yet, and maybe it had been thought best to leave them where they were. I suggested that we should all take a vote on what is best to do. On one hand, if we get rescued or not, some people may want to bury their lost relatives. But on the other hand, removing the bodies isn't going to be a nice job, and some people may think it's best to leave them to rest where they are, especially as many will remain unknown and unclaimed. Jacob said that once the new shady area had been constructed, we should use that time to gather everyone together and discuss. The sun was high in the sky now, and soon all the shade would be gone. Men were working on some kind of construction within a cave-type area of the big rock. I could see huge white sheets that looked like bed sheets being secured with bits of wood and debris. It didn't look very strong, but there wasn't much of a breeze, so it might be secure enough. The hottest part of the day was spent under the makeshift shade. It was large enough to fit everyone underneath. There was about 300 of us in total. The caved part of the rock now had a large canopy made out of cotton sheeting. If there was anything more than a breeze, the sheeting would blow away. I had no clue where the sheeting had come from. It was larger than bed sheets, that was for sure. More like the size of huge sails. The things people pack to go on holiday. The majority of the group had agreed on getting the bodies out of the plane. This would be done later in the day once it had cooled down. Jacob announced that he tried climbing the rock to see what was up there and to light a fire. A couple of other able-looking men said they would join him. The rest of the day was spent talking to people and listening and contributing to plans that were being made about fishing and making some kind of boat. There was such a rich skill set within the group. I felt confident about our survival. I almost felt like I was enjoying myself. Emotions when in shock do tend to shoot all over the place. My high spirits were soon followed by feelings of despair. Saul stayed close to me the whole day. We provided each other with a lot of comfort. Him needing me kept me sane. Jacob and the men returned from their climb safely. The green on the top of the rock was both moss and grass. Some of it was scorched by the sun, but most of it seemed to be thriving, they said. They had lit a signal fire and saw evidence of birds' nesting spots and small rodent-type creatures, but had not seen any animals. It was definitely going to be better explored another time. Everyone fed themselves and settled down for the night. There was enough food for the next day, but then that would be it. Jacob, Saul, and I slept like 3 spoons. Jacob behind me and Saul curled up in front of me. It was warm until it started to rain in the early hours. We were all soon soaked and awake. The rain was cold but not heavy. People rushed around looking for suitable containers to catch the water in. The cave offered a bit of shelter from the rain, but not everyone could fit in. The sheeting used for shade allowed the rain water through in huge drips. If the rain continued, there was a risk of the whole contraption collapsing under its weight. Finally, a few hours later, the sun began to rise and the rain stopped. Some of us walked around to the other side of the rock so that we could benefit from the sunlight hitting our sodden bodies and clothes. Both fires were out, so we'd have to build new ones once everything had dried out. Weeks later. Numbers were reducing. The food had all gone, and although some people were great hunters and fishers, there was never enough food to go round. Only rodents and birds had been caught. We kept the hunters, doctors, and helpful able-bodied people fed. The rest ate if there was any left. The amount of sick, dead, and dying had risen. The group had split fast into the strong and the weak. Myself, Saul, and Jacob were doing okay. Saul and Jacob were good hunters, so I was luckily kept fed. I helped out with cooking, fire-minding, nursing the sick, and any other odd jobs around our now quite organised camp. The people able had set tasks and everyone just got on with it. Main objectives were keeping the fires lit, especially the signal fires, keeping as many people fed and hydrated. The challenges were storms and hunting. As the death toll rose, this got easier. Sad, but reality. I could see a dot in the sky. It got bigger. It was a helicopter. Everyone who could frantically started waving at it. They had seen us and were coming in close. A rope dropped and a man slid out of the hovering helicopter onto the sand, followed by a bag. I looked up into the helicopter and another man was squatting, holding what looked like a filming camera. The man on the beach had opened his bag and pulled out a similar camera. People had started to run towards him. I started to walk, but felt stunned and confused. What the hell were they doing? There was no sight of supplies, and we weren't all going to fit into that little helicopter. Where were the boats and the planes? We should be getting rescued, not filmed. The man was surrounded by those who had reached him. "Thank goodness you've come," people were explaining. "Have you come to rescue us, right? Where are the boats? Are others coming to help us?" "It's just me, I'm afraid," he answered. "What do you mean it's just you? How are you going to rescue us by yourself?" The man continued to be bombarded with questions as he tried to move out of the crowd and start to film all around. Frustrated, I ran up to the man and grabbed at the camera. "Stop bloody filming and answer our questions, will you?" I yelled. The cameraman pulled his camera away from me. "If you calm down, I will explain everything." We all went silent and waited. I glared at him, willing him to hurry up and start talking. "We are here for a filming for a TV program. We were lucky to find you, as nobody knows where you are. We heard that the plane went down and decided to try and find you as other search attempts had failed." He paused before continuing. "Now, we will alert the search parties of your location, but only if you work with us and let us film you first. This is going to be worth a fortune for us. Once we have what we want, we'll get the rescue teams here." We all just stared at him in dismay. The group's anger began to rise. We all started walking towards and around the man, and he started to slowly back away. "Now I know what you're all thinking, and you are all wrong. Even if you smash my head with a rock, he up there with his camera will not get any help. He'll just keep filming. The only way to get out of here is to do what I say. The chances of being found otherwise is very low. It's been weeks since the crash, and the world presumes you were all dead. They are only really searching for the black box from the plane now." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Bribing us for rescue? What the absolute fuck? Well, I never saw this coming. We all just stood around looking at one another shocked. Then everyone was talking at the same time to each other and at him. Everything he said made the group angrier. The helicopter remained hovering overhead filming. Many shouted and cursed using finger gestures. "How do you expect to make money from this? It's criminal. We'll tell the world what you're doing and you'll be sent to prison." "We have plenty of buyers for this footage, and we will make enough money to hide forever. You are the unfound survivors, and your families will pay everything for snippets of evidence that you're alive. That and our other plans for you," he said, sniggering. Tears filled my eyes as I imagined my mother parting with money just to get a video of me alive. I became instantly angry. We had no guarantees that they would call for help. Most remained around the man, shouting and questioning him. I and Jacob and a few others came away from the crowd and began discussing our options. He'd expect us to feed him whilst he was filming us. Filming us struggling, starving and dying. How long would he wait before leaving and getting help for us? That's if they even bother to get us help. Wouldn't they make more money filming us all die? Would they put bets on who the sole survivor would be? Talks suggested that we might not have a choice. If we said no or smashed his camera, what did we gain? I personally wanted to smash his head against a rock and take our chances that the guy in the helicopter would report us or be caught and made to give our location. Even better, I could maybe get into the helicopter. After much discussion and shouting, the majority of us felt like we may as well allow the filming. Our chances seemed better with this man on the ground, with him wanting to survive as much as us. We'd ignore him as much as possible. The helicopter wouldn't be able to stay up there for long. It would need to refuel. Civilization couldn't be that far away for them to have been able to get here. How far can one tank of fuel get them? As expected, the helicopter pulled the rope up and left after a while. It headed back where it came from, a southeast direction. Everyone dispersed and got on with whatever they were doing before our rude visitors had arrived. He fiddled with his camera and then began walking around filming. Most of us either ignored him or gave him a sour look. He was asked when his friend would be returning, but he wasn't forthcoming. The next day the helicopter returned. Another camera was lowered down on the rope and swapping with the one that he had been using, which was then lifted up onto the helicopter and flown away. This continued to happen almost daily. A group of us got together away from the camera to discuss a plan of action. If someone could get on that rope and get into the helicopter, they could potentially force the pilot to get help. The difficulty was getting anywhere close, as they always made attempts to do the swaps as far away from us as possible. The days passed with a few failed attempts to get near the camera swap point. Luckily we weren't spotted, so there were no repercussions. After about a week, a blue helicopter came into view. It landed on the beach, and we could then see it was a police helicopter. The sudden excitement was electric. The poor policeman was suddenly covered in excited half-naked people hugging and kissing him. I noticed Mr. Cameraman had snuck off behind a rock. Once everyone had calmed down, we learned that a search and rescue boat was on its way. The reason they'd found us is because the family of one of us was very rich and had offered a hefty reward. The cameraman's partner had taken the offer and disappeared. Mr. Cameraman was under arrest. Feeling very relieved, we all helped the policeman find and arrest him. He then got put on board the helicopter. The policeman didn't leave us until our orange rescue boat came into view. The end. Thank you for listening.